Alright everyone, and welcome back. Now, although we said this is our tutorial recording, I just want to go and pick up on one thing. That one thing is called subrogation, okay? And we're going to go to page 180 and look at the case there to just explain this in some more detail. It's on page 180. Okay, so this is the case of Lister and Romford Ice and Cold Storage Company Limited. It says Lister was employed by Romford, okay, as a waste disposal truck driver. His father was also employed by the same company, and they worked together, father and son. One day, while reversing his truck into a loading bay, the son lost sight of his father. His father was directing him. Okay, he's reversing. And actually, this was in which year? So this was like in 1957, right? So, and accidentally ran over him. The father then brought an action against whom? The employer. Because under which theory? Why would you be able to go from the son, who's an employee, to the employer? The vicarious liability. Thank you. All right. Brought an action against the employer and succeeded on the basis that Romford Ice's employee, his son, was negligent. Can you see how the analysis is going to go? So you have to prove that there is a duty of care. Okay? And that duty of care has been breached. And that this breach caused the father's injuries. The company's insurance, and that's what I'm after, the company's insurance company then exercised its right of subrogation by bringing an action against the son. So what is happening here? Follow the money. The father wants money from his son. His son doesn't have money. So the father is going to sue the employer. The employer is going to pay him. Most likely the employer is what?
You're going to fire the son?
Yeah, but the employer, we're looking at the money now. The employer is what? Most likely going to be?
Going to be fighting that charge? No. The employer is going to be fighting the son.
Yes. People, why am I talking about the insurance company already? How did the insurance company get involved? So it must be that the employer was what? Insured. Thank you. So the employer went to the insurer paid the father. But now what are they going to do? So they turned around now and used subrogation by bringing an action against the son. Is that useful? What are you going to get out of that? Does the son have money? Does the father have money? It stepped into the shoes of the company and claimed that the son had been in breach of his employment contract. So the point about getting him fired. So as a result of his failure to exercise due care and skill, he had caused his employer to suffer damages. That's enough for now. Let's jump into the tutorial. So as usual, it's the Wentworth-Miller method, same approach. Let's go back now to page 157. And let's look at the last question, which is question 10. It was late at night and very wet. And rather than waiting for a taxi to take her home, Anna was only too happy to accept a lift from Michael. He smelled strongly of alcohol and had trouble keeping the vehicle on the road. Anna decided to continue the journey as it was raining very heavily. Shortly afterwards, Michael lost control of the vehicle and hit a tree, leaving both Anna and himself seriously injured. The question, will Anna be able to successfully sue Michael in negligence, and what does she need to establish in order to succeed in such an action? This is the full menu question. So the starting point has to be what?
Can she do it? Maybe.
But we know the parties, we know what they want, and most importantly, you have been pointed to the premise. You don't have to guess. I want you to talk about negligence. So, what is the first thing you're going to do? That's in your head. So hopefully this is your third wheel, right? This is your third wheel. By the time we get to week 10, you have to do that on your own. You just jump into the premise and the issues. What are the premises here? What is the premise here? Negligence. Okay. What do you need to do now once you know that it's negligence you need to talk about? Identify the elements. What are the elements of negligence? You don't have to memorize, of course, but what's the first element? Existence of a duty of care. Second element? Breach of that duty. Third element? Causation. Yeah, damage. What do you think? Let's start with the first one. Is there a duty of care in this case?
Yes.
On Michael towards Anna.
Yes.
Why? Someone says yes. Why?
He knew that he was drinking. He knew it.
No, so forget his drinking.
Yeah, okay.
He's very sober. Does he owe a duty of care towards Anna? Why?
He's in control of the vehicle.
Which we called, he is an
Of the
occupier.
Yeah.
So as an occupier, the premises here is his car. Okay, and you stepped into his premises. So, is there a duty?
Yes.
Okay. Second element. So when your head, you're going, yes, I can just write a few sentences, one sentence on this. This is not the important issue here. What is the second element? The second is the breach. Did Michael breach his duty towards Anna?
Yes.
And someone says yes. Why is that?
Because he lost control of the vehicle and hit a tree because he was supposed to be, his duty of care is to get her to her destination safely, and part of that is also the drinking thing where it's like, if he's been drinking, he should not be on the road first.
Okay, you can put that in writing under the heading breach of duty. What about the third element, causation? What were the injuries here? Seriously injured. They both were seriously injured. So, there was damage. What about causation? So causation has to go through two steps. You have to talk about the but-for test, or what we call factual causation. But for Michael's acts and swerving the car and hitting the tree, Anna wouldn't have been injured. But also, we have to look at remoteness, or what we call now the scope of liability. Should Michael be found guilty given this factual scenario? Okay? Now, I'll leave it to you. But that's how you do it. Every time you have something like this, you have to start. So where are the issues here? Three elements. Where are the issue? The first element is an issue? Not really. You just say something very quickly. Second element is an issue? Mostly that's the biggest part. Third element, causation, there's no issue really. Okay? But doesn't mean that you just leave it. You have to say something because we need to know that there are three elements. But the issue is where you spend most of your time explaining. All right. Once we have done all of that, now are you going to say that Michael was negligent? What's your conclusion? Don't leave it after you have said, yes, there's a duty. Yes, the duty has been breached. Yes, Michael caused Anna's damage, Anna's harm, Anna's injury. And then what? Now he's negligent.
I would say Anna's also response, yeah, somewhere, because she knew that he had been drinking.
So what do we call that in our analytical structure? We call it the counter premise. We call it the defenses or counter premise. So don't forget that once you have done your analysis, now you'll find the answers in your textbook a little bit different because they don't cover all the steps. This is a full menu, so you have to go through all of those steps to get the full marks for this question on the exam. You have to go through the elements, identify the issue, and after that you go to the counter premises. What are the counter premises here? There are only two. You remember them? Which we call which defense?
The counter premise.
No. There are two defenses we said under negligence. Can you go back to page 127 and have a look at the analytical structure?
One of the honest and reasonable mistake.
No. Actually, it's on page 124. Step 4. You'll find that there are two counter premises. The first is called contributory negligence, which you could argue under the Civil Liability Acts, or you could argue voluntary assumption of risk. Do you think there was a voluntary assumption of risk here?
Yes.
Why?
Because she
Knew. What?
that he was negligent at risk.
No.
She knew the risk.
She knew the risk. What's the risk?
That he was drunk and was not convicted.
How did she know that he was drunk?
She could smell.
Smell. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Being a general danger to society.
Okay. Let's change the scenario and say that Michael, in fact, was a taxi driver. Okay? Or an Uber.
Google was stupidly flexible.
Sorry?
Google rules are stupidly flexible as far as I'm aware.
On the intoxication of the drivers and so on?
Say so. Intoxication, because that's just a law in general.
Okay, let's hold that thought, but let's just say that she got into a taxi with Michael, who's the taxi driver. Okay? Does that change her voluntary assumption of risk? Okay, someone says no. Why not?
Because if he's still drunk and he's still a taxi driver, she still knows that there's a risk.
So, how likely is she to be able to judge whether he's drunk or not getting into the taxi? You can still smell it. Okay. Let's say that he's not drunk. Okay? Let's say that he is intoxicated, but because he took some drugs. Okay? So you can't smell it.
You can still notice his driving patterns and maybe just sort of erratic behaviour and side effects
When?
while he's driving.
Okay. So, let's throw that in there. Let's say you got into the taxi, there's no smell, okay? The guy, you told them where you want to go, and he started, okay? And while he's driving, you started feeling, that there's something wrong with this guy. He's not in control. All right? What now? Is she still under this voluntary assumption of risk?
I think
A reasonable person. Okay. So just can you see the difference? What if Michael has a heart condition? Okay? And what if he forgot, he's still the taxi driver, but he forgot to take his medication? So, while he's driving Anna home, okay, he got a heart attack. And he lost control of the car and the rest follows. He did not die, okay, but they both ended up with serious injuries. What happens now? Is Michael, so can you see that this could be a question in the exam with A, B, C, D? So we keep playing with the facts to see what you are doing, whether you really know what you're talking about or you just keep repeating the same thing. The nuances. What now? Is Michael still liable? He suffers from a heart condition. He forgot to take his medication, and that followed.
Well, would that be considered negligence because he omitted to perform an act which would mean that he would be able to perform better on the road? So he may have neglected to remember it, but that still is considered negligence, right?
So what could he raise in terms of a defense?
He knew he had a heart condition.
Okay, let's run with that argument. He knows he has a heart condition. Who else knows he has a heart condition, you reckon?
His doctor, his family.
And most importantly, his employer. Okay, his employer knows he has a heart condition. What now? What do you want to do with that?
There would have to be some kind of agreement or contract with the employer to say you have to be on your medication for you to safely drive.
Okay. So is he still liable or not, do you think?
Yes, he would be liable.
He still would be liable.
Well, if there is a contract between...
It would be subrogation, wouldn't it, as you said, where it's kind of like she could sue the company.
Okay, but we're saying that he's negligent, first of all.
Yeah.
You start with that point. He's negligent. Okay. What if he did not have a heart condition?
And that he just...
And just he had a heart attack for the first time ever?
Well, that then means that it wouldn't be negligence because he would have no control over the whole situation to begin with and wouldn't have been able to reasonably foresee.
And a reasonable person, how would a reasonable person take precautions against such a thing?
Yes, so therefore it wouldn't be negligence because there's no, it's unforeseeable. It's something that's
Okay.
unforeseeable.
Accident.
Good.
Yeah, it's essentially the same as any other accident.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. Let's leave that. Let's go to something else. Let's go to question 5. Again, page 186. 87. Norris had decided for some time that he wanted to purchase a motel. After looking at several different areas, he settled on Port Stephens in New South Wales as offering both the potential for a business and the lifestyle he was seeking. He rang sorry folks, sorry Carl, just make sure that you see what I see. He rang a number of real estate agents inquiring whether they had any motels listed for sale. Finally, he found a motel and general business listed with an estate agent called Evat. Okay, Evat told Norris that once he got going in his business, it would be a gold mine. Norris sought an accountant's advice. So let's just make sure that this is highlighted. Norris, in fact, sought an accountant's advice. Okay? And then proceeded to buy the business. Within 6 months of buying this motel, Norris was broke because there was neither the tourist numbers nor the local population to sustain the business. Your job now is to advise Norris on whether he can sue the estate agent Evat for his statements about the business and whether you think he can succeed. What do you start with here? What kind of negligence? The premise here is going to be what? Negligence, yes, negligence of what? What did we call it? Negligent statement, misstatement, okay? No, that's not how we're going to do it. We're going to do it one step at a time. And you're going to go and look at the analytical structure that we have on page 177. So you have still to go under existence of duty, breach of duty, and damage. Page 177 tells you that regard must be given to all the circumstances of the case, and while reasonable foreseeability is important, the relationship between the parties combined with reasonable reliance by the recipient on the misrepresentation and assumption of responsibility by the speaker must be shown. Okay? So, do you think that there is a duty? There was a duty on Evat towards Norris to take reasonable care in relation to his statement. Which statement?
That he'd be able to make a lot of money.
Yeah. So the statement that once he got going in this business, it would be a gold mine. All right? What do you think? Was there a duty?
No, it's actually, I'd probably say no.
Okay.
Then Mike twist the words.
So how would you go about arguing no? So that's not how we want to do it. We want to go and answer certain questions and look at certain factors. On page 177, you are given a menu of factors. The first one talks about the environment. So it says professional, social, or request for information. Is this context a professional or a social or a request for information context? Professional. No? And if it's professional, would that throw it towards a duty or no duty? Duty. If it's social, more likely, no duty. Do you see it? Okay. What about other factors? So all I want from you is not just to say yes and no. To do it in a systematic, structured way. Yes?
Another thing to keep in mind is that I don't know how it works in the real estate agency area, but I don't know if the ATB able to advise people on saying, oh yes, this is going to make you lots of money or not. So I don't think it's really their idea. They're really just there to kind of sell the property.
Great. So, where would you take that in the first analysis, under duty? That would go to show what?
It's not the estate agent's responsibility to advise on business.
Yeah.
Advise information. It's not their job, it's not their duty to advise on business relations.
Okay. So which one of the factors that you see on page, which one of the factors you see on page 177 is relevant now? Excuse me. It's not social, it's still professional, but his argument is that would a reasonable person rely on that statement? So it's more in the nature of what we later will learn about and we will call puff. Okay? So like when I show you a car in a TV ad and the car is a transformer, it becomes some sort of a robot or something. It's puff. No way would you go buy the car and they come and tell me, oh, it didn't do that. See? And the same thing, that's the argument at least. The same thing. Sorry?
Unreasonable assumption.
So unreasonable reliance. Unreasonable reliance in the sense that if someone comes and tells you this is a business, this is a gold mine, it would not be unreasonable for you to rely on it. But what else can you argue? What else in the facts tells you whether they relied on the statement or did not rely on the statement? Okay. So
not just taking what got the real estate, so too much face value.
Okay, great. So just on these facts, whom would you really go after if you want to argue negligence? Okay. Why would you go to the accountant, you think? The accountant is going to give you what kind of advice? Based on, yes?
He would probably give you an advice of like how much you'd be paying regularly and the profitability, and based on sort of like the market and stuff like that there, which is more of the information you want to know about
Cash flows,
planning,
yeah, market share. Okay. Okay. And how are they going to do that? They would get what from? They could have restated.
I'm just saying he could have just been given figures from the real estate agent that he then gave to the accountant.
Is that how it's going to go? When the accountant is going to give you the advice, what do they need? Thank you. So the first step is that they are going to ask you to ask the real estate agent or the current owner for the financial statements, maybe even for the last 5 or 10 years. The accountant, sorry? Oh, sorry, who's negligent?
If the accountant did his job properly.
No, that's fine. But I'm just trying to say that this is how it should go. There will be, because he's a professional, okay? There will be evidence given in form of statements, and there would be a report signed on by this accountant telling you that based on these historical figures, I can project that this business will continue to do something similar for the next 5 years. And that would give you actually a valuation. Using your cash flows, you will estimate, you get an estimate on how much you should actually pay in fair market value. Okay? So again, the issue here is whom you go after. So, how would you approach then this question? The question is asking you whether he can sue the state agent for statements about the business and whether you think he can succeed. So don't run away from the question. You have to go through the negligence, the 3 elements, and you will probably come to the conclusion that more likely than not you will fail on this cause of action, and why. Which one of these elements? And then you don't stop there. You would say, I would advise instead to go after the accountant. You might not want to continue to the end, but let the marker know that this is not the way you should do it. It should be that way. All right?
You know, a lot can happen in 6 months as well.
So how do you want to use that? Within the 6 months, what happened?
Well, you could have had another GFC. There could have been a cyclone in the area.
Okay. So?
They haven't explained any specifics.
Yeah. Look, it's fine to say that. So you can actually say that we are missing information in relation to what happened within these 6 months. And you would say that in this business environment, these 6 months could actually be material. And something like maybe the GFC could have actually changed the situation here. So in relation to the negligence of the accountant, or if possible, even the real estate agent. But you don't go with that. Don't put that in and start saying, oh, because of the GFC, these people are not negligent. Okay? Just say that maybe we don't know everything. Maybe there's something missing here. But you put that either at the very end or at the very beginning. And then go back to what I just said. Do it by the book. So don't just put in something to make it easier for you, or something because you like it better that way, and then you say this is actually what happened. I didn't tell you that. You will get points if you add it as an assumption. But an assumption at the very end. Something like, if this was, for example, in the aftermath of the GFC, then those people would not be found negligent. Okay? Don't do it the other way around, because the marker probably is going to be confused, which means you will get a lower mark. All right, so this is basically, there's also this ACL, which is the Australian Consumer Law, which is Schedule 2 of your Competition and Consumer Protection Act, the Commonwealth 1, 2010. That's something we will talk more about when we get to contracts. Just remember that now you are looking at a triangle. Under civil liability, you're looking at torts, contracts, and the ACL. Slowly, slowly, you will get all the pieces. All right, let's look at question 8. I think this question is from the previous one. Yeah, page 157, question 8. It says, consider each of the following fact situations and suggest whether or not causation is present. Remember, causation is the third element. Okay? So all of this stuff, just to be clear, all of the stuff we do in these tutorials does not have anything to do with your quiz marks or your assignment marks, relatively, and your second quiz marks. So that's 20 marks plus 20 marks plus 10 marks, that's 50 marks that have nothing to do with this. Then you have another 15 marks that's going to come from part A of the exam, which will have something to do with this, but those questions are multiple choice. So, still easy. So now you're up to 65 marks. That's what? A B. Roughly. But if you want to get to an A, just to be clear, you have to go through this. Which means that there will be 35 marks in your part B of the final exam that you have to go through, and if you don't go through, you're not going to get an A on HD. It's easy to pass this course, but it's not easy to get an HD. Fair enough? Causation is the third element of our negligence cause of action. And as we said, it has two components. The first is what we call factual causation, and the second one is what we call remoteness. Let's look at the analytical structure. So the first part is what we call the but-for test. But for the actions of the defendant, the plaintiff would not have suffered the harm that they did. Okay? Or, and you have to, after you establish factual causation, if the answer is yes, okay, like with Anna and Michael, then the next question is the scope of liability. Now you're talking about normative. Should Michael be held responsible for the harm? So this is policy considerations, and it's a value judgment. So there's that ethical component as well. Let's look at the first scenario. A person was sitting in a stationary car that was hit from behind by another car. He was thrown forward and struck his head on the steering wheel. The collision resulted only in minor damage to the vehicles and minor injuries to the driver of the second car. The accident triggered a benign growth that developed into an inoperable malignant tumor. Is the driver of the second vehicle liable for the benign tumor becoming malignant? Let's start with the first causation, which is our factual causation. But for the accident and the person in the second car, or the driver in the second car, hitting the person in the first car, but for that act, okay, would this malignant tumor have developed?
Well, is there any position in the whole development of the tumor where it could have, you know, they could have said stop it?
Of course, there could be. But based on these facts, do you see anything there cutting or interfering with the causal link from the accident to the malignant tumor?
It does say clearly that the collision resulted in...
So there is no what we call actionis interveniens. Just assume what you have in front of you. Based on that, is there actual causation? Most likely than not, yes. a reasonable person would come to the conclusion that but for the collision, there wouldn't be a malignant tumor. What about remoteness? What about this idea of scope of liability? Should this driver of the second car be held liable for this malignant tumor? Someone says no. Why not? So we're looking at things like this. Okay? In remoteness, you're asking, is it appropriate for the scope of the negligent person's liability, the second driver, to extend to the harm so caused? And if so, should they be held responsible for the harm? In deciding, you have to ask things, among other things, whether or not and why responsibility for the harm should be imposed. So there is a value judgment, something ethical. Okay? Yeah.
You argue that the person who crashed into the stationary car did not know about the tumor, that there was no way to know that this would happen.
If they knew or didn't know, you think that would affect whether they should be held liable or not?
That's what I'm asking.
Okay. What if they knew? What if they knew the person in the first car? Let's say that they knew. Yeah. Let's give them names. Okay. Anna and Michael. Okay. Anna is in the second car. Michael is in the first car. Anna came in and hit Michael, okay, from behind in that stationary car. Okay. And Michael hit his head on the steering wheel. Okay. And then Anna knew, okay, that Michael was earlier diagnosed with cancer, even brain cancer. Where? Okay, so we're saying, okay, so let's say that she thinks, or she knows, he was suffering from cancer. Now what? What are you saying? What happens now? Is she now, should she now be held as causing this malignant tumor, even under the remoteness or scope liability test?
I have no idea.
Anyone? She knew. Anna knew that Michael was suffering from cancer, and she came and hit the car from behind. What do you think? That's relevant?
I don't think it feels like it's relevant. Like whether you know or you don't, it still kind of seems like it doesn't really affect the situation based on whether people know each other or not. Just, I don't, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like,
Okay.
it doesn't influence, it's like the fact which doesn't really matter. It's like, it's whether they know each other or not, it's still somebody ended up getting a benign malignant tumor in there.
So, what do you think? Should they be held liable for the malignant tumor? They should be?
Well,
No. Why not?
I think that they should be more sort of challenged for the fact that they actually, with reckless driving, would probably be more of what would be appropriate, rather than actually, you know, it's negligence intent with resulting in death or whatever it is.
Okay. So let's flesh this out a little bit more. I want two things that you will cite. Okay? Or argue. Remember, arguing is always with facts. Give me two facts that will tip it towards the no. That she should not be held liable for this malignant tumor.
Would you purposefully run your own car into someone else's car?
She didn't.
Where does it say on her?
She was negligent.
I'm not saying that nobody knew about the tumor in the first place.
Okay, just let go of knowing about the tumor, please. Okay? For now, I just wanted to focus on what you see in front of you. There's nothing about that here, knowing or not knowing. What you see in front of you, can you infer some facts that can tip it towards the no? She should not be held liable.
Well, to me, if Michael was actually wearing a seatbelt, he might have actually hit his head on the back, which might then have triggered the actual benign growth.
There's no mention of a seatbelt, though. You don't know.
So, would you expect when someone hits a car from behind that the car is stationary, that you would actually be catapulted sort of forward and hit your head on the steering wheel? Or would you expect that there would be some mechanism that would stop you from doing so? Like an airbag
Or something would have triggered.
Yeah, vehicle has a seatbelt.
or a seat belt. So you reckon he's also contributory negligent? There could be an element of contributory negligence?
All cars have airbags.
Okay. Not all cars have airbags. That's what I want to see when you write about yes or no. But I go back and ask, maybe he was contributory negligent. What else do you see in front of you? Two things in front of you that you could say, but look, this is so-and-so, and look, this is so-and-so. We really don't know.
Well, I'd like to know what the probability is of someone, like how many accidents are hit where people are hit from behind, just
Okay.
how many then actually get a benign.
Would the reasonable person think that would result? Yes.
It's something to do with the fact that it resulted in minor damage to the vehicle.
Thank you.
Which wouldn't actually mean that he, like, if there was minor damage to a vehicle, then one would assume that the stationary car was probably bigger and probably, yeah, what's kind of that?
Maybe he didn't sign it.
Would you be able, in an exam situation, to pick up on this idea of minor? Minor. Would the minor damage cause something that would end up becoming malignant tumor? Does that make sense? So this is the reasonableness, remoteness. Should you then be held liable after minor damage for something that maybe costs maybe hundreds of thousands in medical bills?
The reasonable person would not assume so.
All right, let's move on. What else can you argue with? What facts can you argue with other than minor?
Well, how can you say the accident triggered the number?
How do they know
It could have been something else. It could have been, maybe he works around radiation. You never know. So, or works with satellites.
But can you see something else? Can you see something else that you can just highlight and say, hold on, we don't know that. Where is that?
No, when they're driving.
No.
Speed.
No. Can you, am I reading it wrong or?
So you're saying what aren't we being told?
Yeah. There's something we're not being told.
I thought we were supposed to assume based on the fact we've got up there.
Yeah, it is there, but it leaves something open. Why didn't they say that? Or is it just me now because it's too late?
It doesn't say that he was actually the driver. He could have been in the passenger side, but hit the steering wheel.
Okay, that's another one. Does that change anything?
Like the sun, it's not there.
Well, let's look at this sentence. The accident triggered a benign growth that developed into an inoperable malignant tumor. What's missing?
Where is the
Where? Thank you. No? Are you being, because you are conditioned to think, oh, brain, right?
So you really put on a tumor on his foot and then just chop it off.
I know, but that's what I want to see in your answers if you want an HD, okay? It's the idea that you can say, well, so at least tell me, I'm not being told where this tumor is, so I'm going to assume that it's actually a brain tumor.
Can you also bring in time, like how the length of time it could have developed a tumor? Yeah, like 20 or 40.
That's a perfectly valid argument. Another thing you were not told is after how long?
When did he get the tumor scan after the accident?
So, okay? And maybe you need to also talk a little bit about the limitations period of when that negligence could actually be brought as a cause of action. This is just causation. Let's look at another scenario. Look, folks, this takes time, okay? So this is week 4. By week 10, you'll find that this is very comfortable for you. You know, you'll start to pick at least one point, one important point, and that will get you the HD. This question: a person was hospitalized after injuring himself at work due to a pre-existing brittle bones condition, he fractured his leg while in hospital. This more than doubled the amount of time he had to spend in hospital, and as a result, his expenses were high. Is the employer liable for the injuries received while the employee was in hospital?
Maybe.
So let's unpack. Don't jump into the answer. That's not what's important. We want to just unpack it. We know that we have to do two things. The first thing is the but-for test. So you have to ask yourself, but for injuring himself at work and hence going to the hospital, this person wouldn't have fractured his leg. Does the fact that he has a pre-existing brittle bones condition contribute to this factual causation? No. Doesn't matter, because if that started first and then this happened second, you have the two facts, you link them, that's a factual causation. Well, you could argue otherwise. It's all right.
It doesn't explain what he was hospitalized for.
No, it was
It
just,
says he injured himself.
yeah.
Fractured his legs.
No, that was in the hospital.
Just as injured himself.
No, we're not told what the injuries are, but while he was there, he also acquired this other fractured leg. So the employer, is the employer liable for the injuries at work?
No, the hospital. No, sorry.
Yeah, well,
Yeah. Yes, because he was technically hospitalized.
More likely than not. What about the second kind of injuries?
The second injury is definitely the hospital, because once you enter a hospital, it's the hospital's responsibility, duty of care to keep that patient.
So on the but-for test, so we're looking at the employer for now. Is the employer liable for the injuries received while the employee was in hospital? So is there a but-for?
There's no but for, because the thing is that he wouldn't have been in hospital if it wasn't
Okay.
work.
So you reckon we can clear that hurdle? What about remoteness?
Remoteness, I do think that's
So what do you do for remoteness? You have to ask yourself, should the employer be held responsible for the employee's harm? A value judgment. Should they? What do you think?
I don't think employers should be held responsible for what happens in the hospital, given that they had no control over the fact that he injured himself, or no control over the whole entire situation itself. It was kind of almost said, okay, he's no longer in the employer's hands, he's now in the hospital's duty of care instead.
Okay. What about this pre-existing condition? How is that going to play? If you have a pre-existing condition,
Shouldn't the hospital know about it?
But his work should know about it as well.
so if the employer knows about this pre-existing condition,
They should have told the hospital of this existing condition.
would it not be reasonable to know that if this person is injured at work, he might still, or she might still get more, his leg, he might still get more injuries at the hospital? What kind of work does this person do? Does that matter?
Yes.
How old are they? All of that, does that enter into the remoteness calculus? So all I want from you is not just to say yes or no. All I want from you is just to flesh it out. Make a value judgment. Okay? Raise these questions. Yeah? Huh? Show that you have spent some time thinking about it. Let's go to the last one.
It also didn't tell you, it only said that the amount in hospital, his time doubled. That could have jumped up from 2 days to 4 days. They haven't technically told you how long he is out.
Okay. The other thing, double does not tell you the actual time. And that actual time could also be a reason to say whether, that should be part of the remoteness.
So it's taking out of the job, maybe. It affects his work.
So what I'm saying here basically is the expenses became double.
There's also the fact that how can you
Oh.
actually attribute how he fractured his leg, it's like explicitly to the pre-existing brittle bones condition. Like it could have actually been partly due to one thing, but also partly due to.
But we're not told. It's just you.
Okay.
So again, I really want to emphasize this, folks. Don't go in the final exam and introduce just assumptions like that, because then you will be answering a question very different from the question given to you, which means the marker is going to be very confused, which means they will either send it back to me, which is not going to be a good thing, or, trust me, you don't want me to mark your paper, or they will give you a no grade, no mark. So keep it super simple. The markers, just keep it super simple. No? All right. So as I said again, when you answer these questions in the exam, the most important thing is the structure. So leave a lot of white space. Make sure that you always put issue 1. If you want to look at the elements, element 1, element 2, 1 page for element 1, 1 page for element 2, 1 page for element 3. You don't finish the page, leave it blank. Leave it white, because you might come back and think of something and write it down. You don't have to fill out everything. Leave blank spaces, okay? That helps actually the marker see what you're doing. Every issue or element on 1 page, okay? So you can ask for another booklet. It's free. All right. What about the last one? While police were pursuing a thief. Police were pursuing a thief. A decayed tree fell onto the police car. Is the thief responsible for the damage to the police car and its occupants? Again, but for this car chase or otherwise car. So let's say this car chase was but for the police pursuing the thief, the tree would have fell on the car. Yes?
Oh wait, are you saying the tree would? Oh wait, the tree still. Yeah, if it wasn't for the car chase, the tree still would have fallen down.
So the tree was falling down. The tree was falling down.
Yeah.
It just happened that they were going that way, and they were going that way because of him.
Maybe. What if they don't know? They haven't told you. Has the tree
But I'm asking
fallen
you to
down?
apply a test. The test is called but for.
I don't know what the fuck but for means.
So I'm telling you, but for. So this is what we're talking about. It's a common law, but for test. So the factual position, you ask if the defendant, i.e. the thief, had acted carefully, would the police have suffered this particular loss in terms of the tree falling on their car? Did the thief cause the harm? Did the thief cause the damage to the car?
How did the tree fall?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Falling?
He could have pulled it down with a tether.
No, again, don't go there, because that's not what's in the question. Try to resist this urge to just throw in stuff.
But no, it's not throwing in if we're
That's not
reasonable
it's
assumption.
reasonable, but that's really not in the facts, right? That's not in the facts. All I'm asking you is to look at the facts for now and ask, was the thief not careful? The thief was not careful, and that caused this damage to the police car and to the occupants.
Are we saying wrong place, wrong time kind of scenario?
So is that how a reasonable person would act? Wrong place, wrong time?
I'm interpreting it, because the way I interpret it is that it's not the thief had no influence over the tree.
Okay.
The tree itself was decaying, so it's been dying for ages.
Could-
It's a freak accident.
Could the thief have exercised some care to make sure that this tree wouldn't fall on the police car?
He
Thomas wouldn't even know of that, to be quite honest.
It's possible, but unlikely.
It's reasonable to assume that he could not have
Organised such.
prevented it from falling on.
Okay, let's keep it simple, folks. All I want from you, when you are doing your analysis on remoteness or on causation, just ask these questions. So this is an open book exam. So what I expect is that you have your own notes, or at least a photocopy of that diagram, the flow chart. And I don't want you to just jump and say, maybe there's causation, maybe I want you to go through the analytical structure, please. So I want to see that the third element is going to say causation. I want to see that you have looked at factual causation, maybe even one page, and then next page is going to talk about remoteness. Under each page, you're going to ask these questions. So it's the discipline and the structure rather than just telling me something, because there's no right or wrong. I just want to see that you can do legal analysis. At least you got a flavor of how legal analysis is done. So it has structure. You have to follow certain flow charts, if you will, but it has to be done systematically. Okay. I think that was the last thing for today. Okay, that's it for today. Next week, when I come here, we will be starting on contract. Thank you.